Hi, I'm Simon, and thanks for tuning in once again to The Ordinary Filmmaker. I've got two very special guests with us today. We have Jordan Drake from DP Review, and joining us shortly will be Dan Watson. Unfortunately, Dan decided to do a update as he restarted his computer. Well, actually, I think it was the computer's idea to do an update, so Dan will be joining us later. So let's press the right button here. Jordan, thanks for joining us on The Ordinary Filmmaker. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. This is something I was just saying to you on the pre-show. I don't get a chance to hang out with other, video people, content creators, all that kind of stuff as often as I used to. So it's really nice to jump on here and catch up with Dan as well.
Well, hopefully Dan will be joining us lately. Now, I used to have Windows XP. I used to be a certified or Microsoft certified systems engineer, so I have a lot of experience. But sometimes when you accidentally trigger one of those updates, it can seem like it can take hours before it finally finishes. So hopefully
it's deadly, yeah.
Now, one thing I wanted to talk to you about is the chemistry that you have with Chris Nichols on your videos. It seems very evident. It's very down to earth. How long have you known each other for?
So we've known each other for about 15 years at this point. But we started putting the show together, not that long after we initially met each other back at the camera store. He was a salesperson. He was like the number one salesperson, beloved figure in the Calgary photo purchasing community. And I was super intimidated by him for the longest time.
Why?
Which is kind of funny. Well, he had a reputation as, obviously, good salesperson, really knew his stuff. And I came to photography a little bit late. I'd always been into video since junior high school. But photography, I'd probably only been really into it for about a year and a half before I started working at the camera store. And at that point, I didn't know I was going to be the video guy producing video YouTube shows. I was just trying to kind of make my way in the photo world. So, I did find he knew a lot. He'd been shooting for a long time. And, he is a hilarious, but very sharp-witted kind of guy. So as well, I didn't really want to cross him. But once we started just... it's funny, we just started talking about classic film is what really made us hit it off in the first place. We had a lot of similar film influences and stuff. Just started riffing, and at a certain point, it's kind of like, you know what, we should just start making some incredibly dry, almost unwatchable videos for the store here. And then things evolved from that point. Once you're out shooting together on your day off, you get to really know each other and things get a lot more loose. You're trying to make each other laugh. And that's where kind of the tone of the show evolved over time.
Well, yeah, because I don't know when I really started, or I actually realized that YouTube was useful. Before then, I just thought, YouTube, I don't get it. It had been around for something like 10 years. And then one day, I think it might have been around 2019, I thought, or 2018, this Canon 70D, this guy right here, it's getting a little bit old in the tooth. I told you I wouldn't be doing screen shares, but I didn't say I wouldn't bring up props. 7 odd years old, and I really wanted to replace it. And I looked at everything, and then I just discovered YouTube. And one of the first videos I saw of you two was where you were doing that video of the Panasonic GH5, half an hour long. And one of the first things you said is, no, Chris, this is not about photography. And you guys had me hooked ever since. But I love that sense of that humor, that sharp-wittedness. And I think you have a bit more of a dry sense of humor.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's funny you bring up that GH5 episode, because that is still holding the record for the longest thing I've ever put out on YouTube. A little bit of guilt of like, are people going to sit for 36 minutes? But I had a lot to say about that particular one.
Well, as a viewer, what I can tell you is, and this is true, I'm very good at when it comes to writing, everything needs to be clear, concise, and coherent. And it needs to be as long as it needs to be. And I was seriously looking at the GH5, and that video really helped me. But somebody else has just joined us. Dan, I understand you had some Windows updates or Mac updates. I'm not sure which system you're on. Thank you for finally joining us. How are things with you today?
Absolutely, not too bad at all. Doing well. So let me know if everything is going well with video, audio, all that kind of stuff.
You sound terrific. So does Jordan. And I just want to briefly say to everybody watching, we're going to be here for about an hour today. Both Dan and Jordan have kind of a hard stop of an hour. So drop your questions down below. I already have a lot of questions I've got that I want to talk to Dan and Jordan about. And if you've been watching my channel on a regular basis, it's not all focused on news and rumors. It's a little bit about getting to know Jordan and Dan, their experience, lessons learned, and a little bit of the humor and hard work that goes on behind the scenes. Now, I just spent a few minutes with Jordan, Dan. One thing I've noticed about your videos is they're very well thought out. They instruct, they inform. I have to ask you this question. This is going to be a tough question. Are you ready for this?
You got it.
Were you previously a teacher?
I was not. I'm actually a mechanical engineer. I did robotics design for about 15 years before going kind of back into the camera space. So, but I had to do a lot of meetings and things like that, presentations. So a lot of that kind of came from some of that education, I guess.
Wow. All of a sudden, what comes to mind is Mythbusters and that gentleman who used to do all the robotics, and he had a career in robotics previous. Any robotics within movies, or just it was just fun to tinker with? I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
So yeah, I kind of started doing videography before college. And then when I went to college, it was my side gig while going through it. But then I graduated with a mechanical engineering degree and did assembly robotics for probably about 12 years. And about halfway through that journey is when I kind of started getting back into the photo and video space just as a side hobby. And then a couple of years after that, I started a YouTube channel, and then eventually that picked up. And then now I'm actually full-time into the photo video space through the YouTube channel or through working with clients and all that kind of stuff.
Wow. I think, especially when we're talking to people who are, just getting out of high school or out of college, and they see their whole life ahead of them, and it seems to be rather, well, scary is one way of looking at it, not knowing where to go.
Yeah.
But if we look at our lives, Dan, if you look back, Jordan, if you look back, like you're driving down the road and you look through the rearview mirror, it might seem like you're all over the road, but when you look back, your path is surprisingly straight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let me just see if we're getting any comments coming in. What I'll try to do, guys, I can't guarantee I can get to all the questions and comments, but if you have a question or comment for Dan or Jordan, go ahead and post it, and we'll get to it. We'll do our best to get to it. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about, I'm getting confused because I got two computers here, and I got a trackpad here and a trackpad here, and sometimes I'm using the wrong one. But that's part of me. I don't always take myself too seriously. What is important to me is to be trustworthy, to be down to earth, to be approachable. It's kind of my idiom. What I'd like to, let's go back to you, Jordan, and Dan, I'd like to ask you the same question. How much is what we see the real you? How different are you around your friends and family?
Yeah, I would definitely say there's that old thing that on camera you're yourself plus 25%. And I think that's a really good way to put it. I mean, I'm certainly not as deadpan or like dejected on a regular basis. Just kind of like accepting that Chris is going to inconvenience me. I will stand up for myself a little bit in real life. But yeah, I do think that you do play that dynamic up a little bit whenever you're on camera. But for the most part, my interests, my opinions, everything like that, if you sat down and had a conversation with me, I think you could definitely be able to tell that YouTube Jordan and real life Jordan are very similar people.
Now, you just dropped a little bit.
Wait. Dan, can you attest to that? Because, I mean, Dan and I have known each other for a pretty good amount of time. I'd say we're incredibly close, right? Like, if you were to get married again today, I would be your best man. That's fair to say, right, Dan?
Oh, definitely. You got it.
But how do you feel like when you met me? Was it like, oh, this guy is not what I was expecting at all?
So, no, you were exactly the same as that. So the same types of personality and the same, I don't know, quirks, I guess, that people have that comes out in the YouTube video. A lot of those come out in real life too, which is cool.
Now, I got to ask, because Jordan, when you were responding to that, you said, and I'm going to paraphrase because I've got the memory of a goldfish. What kind of spanners does Chris throw at you?
Sorry, which type of which? Sorry,
spanners. So I'm using my English on me again, or on you. Spanners. It's like you're throwing a wrench into the works. He'll he'll throw something at you, and you're like,
Well, I think it's kind of the nature of our show because we always try to go out into the field. Like we've certainly got episodes inside, but it's usually just, talking about a product announcement or something like that. Whenever we review gear, we try to take it out in the real world. And Chris is actually trying to get pictures and I'm trying to get usable video out of it. So I might have a very clearly laid out plan or like an idea of what our perspective is going into it, but that's constantly shifting while we're actually out there. And Chris is very much like, at this moment, I'm feeling this right now. I want to get that on, but that might not totally flow with the structure or, the perspective that I wanted to have in the video. So I just have to be open to that. And, I can be stubborn, but over time you just kind of learn to go with the flow a little bit. And that would be the main one, honestly. But then also there's plenty of times where it's just like, Chris wants to use a camera or a lens in a way that I wouldn't anticipate myself. And it'll take a little bit of time for me to wrap my head around that. Like, this would be a great location to shoot, like he'll get a 600 mil equivalent lens and be like, let's go shoot street. And I'm just like, that wasn't what I was expecting the words out of your mouth to be, but let's go for it, I guess, right? But those will be the main ones. I mean, we've been working with each other so long at this point. I think we kind of can read where a shoot's going pretty quickly.
And so it's just you two, like you do all the editing behind the scenes, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So Chris does some of the, like, especially with camera and lens tests, he'll do a bunch of testing before we go out. But then, I film the episodes and then I do the back end, like the editing and all that kind of stuff, putting together sample galleries. I get to edit the photos quite a bit, which I've actually started to really enjoy doing. You can listen to a podcast when you're editing photos, but not editing a video.
That is so true. The one thing I can't stand when I'm editing is if I want to watch something at the same time, it's just impossible. Mm-hmm. Dan, now, I can't tell, because when you see these beautifully polished videos, it looks like it's a one-man show. Is your channel a one-man show, or do you have a team of people behind you that help in various activities?
So for the most part, it is a one-man show. Occasionally when we go out for a review of like a big camera, I'll have somebody else come help with some BTS footage, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And then my wife, Sally, does a lot of the photo stuff, especially with like portraits and stuff like that. So when we go out together, if it involves a portrait shoot, I'll shoot a lot of the video stuff, and then she'll do some of the portraits and photo side. But there's nobody that works for me or anything. It's me in my home office, really, honestly.
Wow. And I know how much work that is. And Jordan, I do this. I get it from my mother. I say the opposite of the name I want to say. But if I could have a person to do this with, it would make life so easier. Because it's tough, Dan, when you're doing everything by yourself. It's nice that your wife can help a little bit, but people don't realize doing this is a full-time job.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes quite a bit at times.
So here's my question for you. If you could hire someone for one position, like a classic, an editor or whatever like that, what would you guys want to hire?
Yeah, I know the answer for me because I thought about this so much. So I hate giving up some form of control. Like I like things to look the way that I like to do them. So it's really hard for me to hire somebody to do what I do. But I would love to hire somebody that's better than me, especially in like the After Effects type area, who could basically just take what I do and I'm like, dude, add your 20% to it and make it better. Like I have a hard time having somebody else do what I already do. But if I could have somebody else that just took what I am and made it 20% better, oh man, I'd take that in a heartbeat.
Wow. See, that would be an easy question for me to answer, Dan, because I still consider myself to be wet behind the ears. Well, I've shot video for 7-10 years before this. I was behind the camera, and it's very, very different being in front of the camera. I wonder if I'd want somebody to do the editing for me so I could just shoot, or maybe they shoot and I can focus on being in front of the camera. I don't know. I'd like somebody where I could change the roles, but
yeah.
At my size, I can't afford to hire anybody. And well, I've tried hiring my son. He's 7, but he just doesn't stay focused.
It's really difficult. I've tried to do that. I come from a farm family, so It's like you put your kids to work when they can walk, but producing video content isn't, I don't think, the strong suit of people under 10. But as soon as he's 10, we're cracking the whip.
Yeah, good, good. Well, my son for the first day, like I said, I don't know if I said it in this video. This is what I started the channel with, a 70D, if you can believe it. 1080, quite soft. But this thing has gotten so many miles on it, and now he's taken it. He wants this heavy lens on it. I tried to start him off with the Nifty 50, but it doesn't have stabilization, and of course no in-body. So we put the 18 to 135? Yep, the STM. So we're going to see if we can't bring him into it. I don't want to force him into it, but I want to give him, hey, look, this is an opportunity. And we already started a channel Planet Liam, but he'll come to me and say, hey, Dad, can you do a video? Son, I'm just finishing up mine right now. I can't. Come back to me later. Come back tomorrow. Let's schedule it. And then, of course, he'd rather watch YouTube or Netflix. One question I want to ask both of you is, there's been many reports, even Tony Northrup has said this, but it's becoming more of a challenge to earn a living when it comes to photography. If someone wants to pursue a career in photography, what positions would you guys kind of recommend that people check out? What are the ones that are performing well versus the ones that aren't performing well? Some of the pros and cons for each.
Yeah, I think the main ones, like event is always going to be a thing. You know, we're never going to not have wedding photographers, or companies, if they're doing a big shindig, will always have a photographer on. That's not going to go away. And a lot of commercial stuff too. Like, I know a lot of people who are outstanding food photographers, and they're doing very well right now. Actually, surprisingly, especially with COVID, because people are ordering delivery so much more. You have to have great food photography. Those are the ones that I really see doing well. I mean, classic, you know, big budget fashion and stuff like that, that I see getting squeezed quite a bit, just from the people I know who are in that field. But then kind of the boom of influencer kind of travel photography and stuff too. Go grab a model, go to a pretty place. That is doing quite well. Like my friend Tyler Stallman, who has a fairly successful YouTube channel as well, is based in Calgary and does a lot of that and is doing extremely well. It helps that his wife is a model. You know, that's a perk if you can make that business work out. But those are the ones that I think it's really shifting, because pictures are still a very important thing.
Well, they still tell stories.
Exactly. And in a lot of cases, it's a better medium for some types of stories.
Okay,
what do you think, Dan?
I can't leave it there. Wait, before we go to Dan, you kind of left it with in certain situations or scenarios. Care to name a few?
I mean, I do think when we're talking about like scrolling and things like that, Instagram, I do think, you know, they might say the metrics of video performing better, but I certainly know I'm more inclined to very quickly take in a photograph than sit and wait and watch a video. That might be because I have a little less free time than some people, but that's certainly more what I respond to. And then things like I know there's a lot of event video being done, and I mentioned like on the corporate side, somebody will have a big get together and bring out a photographer and a videographer. And so often I wonder, like, has anyone ever watched the video from these things where the photography is something that can be really quickly and easily digested and shared? So those are a few examples where I think photography still definitely has a leg up over video.
Thank you. And Emgris, thank you very much for the super chat. Much appreciated. Now, Dan, we got this wonderful wallpaper of Image Edge webcam. Are you still there?
Oh, yeah. Let me see what went on with that.
I wasn't sure if we asked a really difficult question. You decided to, sorry, I got to do another reboot. See, my humor isn't as dry. You know what? And that's the funny thing about humor, Jordan, is I still have a dry sense of humor, but sometimes I'm a little bit bubbly. Sometimes too bubbly, maybe. I don't know what it is. I think my personality kind of fits. You know, I'm very analytical. I'm very visionary. I've got the emotional side of it, and I got the analytic side. And I'm not sure sometimes where I want to spend my time.
Right.
Well, Dan, while you're trying to get that going, are you able to field the question, or do you want us to come back to you?
Yeah. So I have audio working fine for now, I guess. So I would say don't ignore local markets. That's another area that doesn't seem to be going away. And a lot of people kind of think national brands or think, you know, these Instagram and travel and stuff like that. But if you ignore your local markets, you're going to be missing out. There are restaurants on the street corners. There are, I shot like a soccer league promo videos for them and stuff like that. So there's a lot of local markets. And I think if you're getting into it now, you just have to be willing to be extremely flexible, because it's a changing space and an evolving space, and the platforms that are going to do well over the next 5-10 years are going to be very different, and the types of services that you might want to offer are going to be very different as well.
Very well said. A friend of mine, Tristan, who works in Toronto, and he works with commercial clients, Nike, etc. One thing he said, and he put this in his live stream, he did this with Canon a couple of months ago. You've got to have a vision. You've got to have an idea of where you want to go, and you got to think creatively. You can't just think in terms of, you can't think very technically all the time. And I think a vision is very important. And I want to ask you two about vision as well. What do you think of Jordan, your vision for your channel or where you want to go?
Yeah, I think we have the structure for the camera reviews really well laid out. But what I always want to make the show bigger, and doing 2 episodes a week certainly constricts what you're able to do there. Yeah. But yeah, we've certainly bandied around for quite a while doing like, okay, we're going to take 2 weeks off and do an almost short documentary kind of piece. That's something I would love to do. And then as well, one of my big passions is filmmaking, but I haven't actually, I was like a grip on something just before COVID hit, but it's really been 3.5 years, I think, since I was actually like a DP on something. And I would love to work more of that back into it. So we are in the early stages of putting together another one of those wooden nickels where we recreate a movie scene with consumer gear. Favorite things to do. The trade-off is it's a whole lot of work for those, tend not to perform nearly as well as like, hey, here's a new mirrorless camera review for you. But at a certain point, too, it's just like, I love doing it, so I should probably get back to doing that every once in a while. So we're in the early stages on that. Doing those full-length episodes, that's just going to be tricky until travel is a lot easier. I think that's just going to have to stay on the back burner, because nobody wants to watch a, half-hour to 40-minute video here in Calgary. Although you sat through the GH5 episode, Simon, so I guess there is some audience for that.
Yeah, and again, well done. Pat on the back to that. Pat on your back to that one. I think it was really well put together, and it wasn't like it was. You took 10 minutes and you drew it out to 30. There's a lot of jam in there. It's jam packed and a lot of goodness. Dan,
thank you.
Yeah.
Same question to you. Vision. What's your vision? Where do you want to be in 5 years?
Oh man, so there are so many different avenues that I enjoy out of this. It is really hard for me to narrow that down to one. I would love to be able to take production value up to a whole nother thing. I love travel. I'd love to get back into that a whole lot more and do more with that. There are just a lot of different avenues. I think that's a question I'm always asking myself, and a question that'll always be changing. So yeah, that's definitely one that's an evolving one for me.
Okay, perfect. Now I'm getting ready. I want to try this segment where we do kind of a rapid fire. I'll just throw out a couple of words or something, or short questions, and see how you guys answer. But before we do that, several people left me questions that they wanted me to ask you. One is from Jesse. He's down in Florida, probably not far from you, Dan. And it's actually directed to you, Jordan. He's also, how do you say it, Panny fan? Or Panny fanboy, meaning Panasonic fanboy. He says, and it's something to the effect of, what is it that keeps you with Panasonic despite not having a decent AF? His words, not mine.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair to say. And we touched on this. We recently did a video about our A-cam setup that we use primarily to shoot the show. The biggest thing is Chris and I are incredibly fortunate that someone is always operating the camera. So if I'm talking on camera, Chris is running it and vice versa. So, both of us can manually focus a camera. And the big thing for me is I really do worry a lot about exposure and having some of the assist tools, things like shutter angle. A lot of that I grew up with. Those are tools that are more commonly on video cameras, and Panasonic does a really good job supplying them. The other thing is Vlog is my absolute favorite log profile. Our recent episodes, we've got something shot on the Canon R5, the Sony A7S III. And I can certainly work with those log files, but I find it takes me quite a bit more time. Where Vlog I've always found very easy to grade without a big, shift in skin tones or something like that. Right now I'm on an S1H with just the natural profile, and it's a little yellow. It's bugging me a bit. But I'm just very familiar with working with the Panasonic colors, and their glass is fantastic for what I'm doing too. Their 2470 2.8 actually has a manual focus clutch on it. It's breathing corrected. It's stuff like that I really love. And it's nice to know, if I ever am able to get back on a set again, all that equipment I'm using for my YouTube show is totally sufficient for proper filmmaking as well.
Yeah, I gotta say, and for the price of a camera like the GH5, I'm always talking about cameras on my show, and I do stare into the lens and look at Panasonic and like, come on, it's the 21st century, give us phase detect. But if you're not needing to pull, if you're not doing run and gun, if you're doing YouTube type stuff or corporate events where you can pull the focus manually, it does a great job. I've got a cheap mic lens here, and I pulled the focus on it manually, and it felt so incredible. It felt so wonderful. But having those capabilities at that price point, I'm using the R5 right now, and it has some of those capabilities, but I still have to use this Ninja 5 to be able to get my waveforms. And you should see me when I go out and shoot in the forest or in low light areas. I got the camera and a tripod. I've got the Ninja and a tripod. I've got another tripod. It's ridiculous. I feel like one of those Sherpas with this 100-pound backpack on my back, and I really envy the capabilities of the Panasonic. I just hope the GH6 and the S1 Mark II or the S1H Mark II, they really do move to that phase detect, because if I think they do, they're going to give Canon and Sony a run for their money.
Yeah, I really think if they keep improving, I'm torn, because if they keep the DFD improving, it does have a lot of potential, having something that doesn't require phase detect pixels on the sensor. Mm-hmm. And I think a good sign of that is like the GH5 II, the G9. If you put those cameras in 4K 60, the autofocus actually works quite well, because it's getting more frames that it can analyze and interpret if the processing gets better. Because my main problem with Panasonic, and I think most people, is the autofocus doesn't work very well at 24 frames per second with a proper shutter speed, 180 degree, 48th of a second shutter speed, because the edges aren't that sharp. If they can improve that, then, it might have made sense for them to invest all this time and money in the DFD. But we will see. I think as sensors get faster, that's going to be the real proving point to see if, because the S1H sensor is a fairly slow scanning sensor, and I think that's part of why the autofocus struggles so much.
Thank you. And that's a perfect transition to the question I got for you, Dan. This, again, is a question from the audience that was recorded before this live stream. And the question is, why on earth, why is the only way to get cinematic 24 frames per second? Now, I'm paraphrasing, but they're asking, why is 24 frames such a big deal? And I don't know if you want to go into the history of why we have 24 frames. I personally shoot 30 all the time because I like that true to life effect. So Dan, yeah. Why do most YouTubers like 24 frames per second?
So a lot of that is just our eyes playing tricks on us. We've watched movies at 24 frames per second since the beginning of movies, and a lot of that came from cost savings on film, just not having the ability to produce more than that for frames per second. But now our eyes are so trained to that, and then we got into these home movie cameras that shot 30p or 30i actually, or 60i in release video into the 80s and 90s, and that kind of gave us our home movie cameras. And so our eyes have kind of differentiated this cinematic feel and what our eyes are seeing from our home video cameras. But I do think that having a lot of motion blur hides elements that otherwise don't look good. Whenever you see, even a lot of these newer TVs can double frame back play, and they have all these enhanced features on them for playing like 240 hertz and stuff like that. Whenever I see that, it doesn't quite look the same. And that's because so much is kind of hidden in these attributes. In photo world, we hide, when we shoot weddings, we like to shoot at 1.4 all the time. Is that the best place for a lens? No, but our background looks like crap. So if we can put it at f1.4 and blur out that background, it's not that we're trying to shoot what's best for the lens. It's what we're trying to convey just a message or hide something or do something else other than what's obvious. So, yeah, 24 frames per second. And actually, Jordan, you probably know way more than this for me than me. But yeah, that kind of helps us hide elements that we don't want to have, or kind of cheat the system and make things look more cinematic than they really are, because we don't have the professional lights and we don't have a lot of the other elements. So it's just the one area that we can match what is going on in most movies.
Yeah, I could do 3 hours on this, but I won't. But I think touching on hiding things, I think, is such a interesting aspect, because it's not like people have not tried to release movies at higher frame rates. But one thing I found really interesting is the things where people are acting at high frame rates historically have been soap operas, were usually shot 60 interlaced initially. And then The Hobbit, I think only the first two they did at 48. And then Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Show. And what's the common thing with all of those is all the critics saying, like, oh, the performances in these are just atrocious. And I do think that 24 frames per second can really mask a lot of an actor trying to act. It just makes it a little bit less believable. I do think that's a really big part of it. And yeah, we are absolutely trained to see something at 24 and say movie. I remember flipping through TV channels, and you could always tell immediately when something was a TV show that you were watching, or if it was a late night movie that night. There's a motion cadence to it that makes our brains snap and say movie. So I think that's a huge part of it. It's funny, the reason I actually switched our show, because I was like, you know what, it's like a documentary or like a TV show, we'll shoot it at 30. But when 4K started happening, not all cameras were able to read out fast enough to get you 4K 30. So we just said, like, you know what? Every camera can do 24 frames per second. So we're switching the show over to that. And I love the look of 24, but it was actually more for reviewing cameras that made us switch that. And then, of course, there was that period where Canon took 24p off of all of their camera bodies. I think specifically to screw with Chris and I, that was a conscious decision.
Oh, you know what? That night, the 90D came out, Chris, I was at my computer and I was getting excited. I thought, okay, I've got the 70D. If I can stick with the 90D, I told my wife, it's $2,000 Canadian. It saves me a lot of money, and I don't have to replace my lenses right away. I can do a slow migration. And so I watched your video, and it's like, oh, this is good. This is good. I'm excited. Yes. And then I watched a few more videos. I watched pretty well everything that came out, and I went to bed exhausted by around 2 o'clock in the morning, woke up, went to work. Thankfully, I was taking the bus, so I didn't have to worry about driving. And then all of a sudden, we lost 24 frames per second overnight. And we also lost all eye. And I'm going like, what are you doing, Canon? It's, as Casey says, it's that cripple hammer. We got all eye on here in 24 frames per second. We have it on the 80D, gone from the 90. We have it on the EOS R, all eye. And then it's gone from the R6. I get I think Canon has a great strategy. They've been following it for many years. They're on a new strategy right now. But sometimes when you look at certain product decisions, it doesn't seem that strategy is followed all the way down through the tactical and to the operational side. So I think this is a perfect segue into the rapid fire segment. And if I had a logo, I'd throw that up. But what I want to do here, because we've only got a half an hour left, I want to throw out a camera brand to each of you, and I want you to say one great thing about it and one thing that you think could be improved upon. And so I'm going to start with Dan this time. Dan, the Fuji X-T4.
Ooh, image quality. I love the image quality out of it. It just looks great. If you're shooting video with it too, I don't know what it is about it, but the highlight roll-off just seems so smooth. So what that camera can produce with an APS-C sensor is doing really well, especially for the price. If I were to pick something that I don't like about it, it's really not related to the camera itself. It's more of the brand itself and just the lack of any full frame cameras or a lot of higher end options. So let's say you want to get into a super high end performing camera, you almost have to switch brands. I mean, the camera can do it, but it's just not going to be to the level of certain other ones. If you want to go shoot sports or go to hike mountains and in some crazy place, the body might not be as weather resistant as a 1DX or something like that. So it's a little bit more limiting to what you can do with it.
Okay, thank you. And Jordan?
My pluses would be very similar to what Dan threw on there. I think Eterna is the best straight out of camera picture that you can get right now, which that camera offers with the IBIS, with the better battery life. The big concern is it really feels like that was supposed to really release simultaneously with a video camera because they pulled the headphone jack off of it. And the IBIS seems like it's very much photo optimized. It can still be a little bit jerky when you're panning, things like that. So I was expecting an XH2 at the exact same time, but that never happened. But with some of the word on a brand new sensor, that makes me think that it might be worth the wait. But in the meantime, I've been shooting a lot of stuff on an XT3. I never updated to the XT4 for that very reason. I like a headphone jack. Keep it simple.
And I got to say, I think that Fuji makes some of the best looking cameras out there. I just love the look of them. All right, so Dan, the next camera is the Pentax K3 Mark III. I know I threw you a curveball there.
That is. So I have not actually gone hands-on with that camera. However, I would say the best thing about it is some of the features that they're introducing in a camera that really not a lot of others were doing when that camera came out. The downside, I guess, is that it's a Pentax, so there's not going to be a lot of support online for it, as a lot of people wouldn't recommend for it, and there's not a whole lot of lens options and a lot of compatibility with other systems. So it's not a bad camera in itself, but kind of in combination with the other options that are out there, not a whole lot of reason to pick it up.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily trying to throw you curveballs. We seem to always talk about Canon. We always talk about Sony, Nikon, and the Olympus. Sorry, the OMD, or is it OM Digital?
Digital.
I don't know. We'll say OMG for now. For oh my god, I don't know what they're calling themselves this month. It's these cameras sort of get left out, so I like to bring them up and give us a chance to talk about them, not necessarily to throw you a curveball. But thankfully, Jordan's had time to Google and look at some things while Dan's been answering the question. Dan or Jordan, what do you think about the camera?
I mean, I got a little bit of time with the K33, and I think Pentax has, I would say, the best ergonomics of any DSLR manufacturer out there. So it feels great. The shutter's awesome on it. It's just, I think it's too little, too late. I don't think that's unfair to say. And same as Dan, I really think a lot of the lenses in their lineup need an update. They have, I believe, 2 lenses that'll take proper advantage of their autofocus system. It needs a lot of work, and I don't think we're going to see a lot of money pumped into R&D over there. So you're buying it to use with your existing glass, and if you do that, it's a great body. I think it's a little too expensive, but I would never recommend anyone jump into the Pentax system at this point. It's for people who are already invested.
Now, they're like the only ones that have IBIS with a DSLR camera, right? Or
yeah, I mean, Sony did it with the SLTs, but of the current people, they're the only ones doing it. And it does work quite well, but it's really disconcerting because it's taking place behind the optical viewfinder. So we shot with a 300mm lens, and it's bouncing around through the viewfinder. You take the picture and it's sharp, but it doesn't inspire a ton of confidence when you're actually composing, which you get used to over time, of course.
The Canon R5, the Sony Alpha 1, terrific cameras. These are the Ferraris and the Porsches and the Lamborghinis that we as kids used to hang on our wall, and maybe some of us still do. But the real sales, the cameras that are the most popular, is some of the more affordable ones. So I'm going to throw out a sort of a mid-range camera here, or a low-end, high-end APS-C, decently priced camera, the Rebel T8i from Canon. Dan, what do you think? Your thoughts on that one?
So this is an area where I think Canon has basically been recycling some of their, just what they've done for the last 10 years on this. The Rebel series, the T series, actually came out. I was working at Best Buy in their camera department. I don't know, over a decade ago.
Everyone comes from a camera store.
Yeah, at some point. And I remember when that came out, and the new cameras are basically a whole lot of the same thing. And I just haven't seen a lot of innovation either in image quality space, or in just, if you're going to base a camera towards people who are maybe beginning. They kind of came out with a dual interface that helped a lot for beginners starting out, but there just has not been a whole lot of new stuff in that camera.
Okay.
Compared to something like what Fuji's doing with their X-T30s, or what Sony's doing with like their A6400s, A6000 series of stuff. That's been a little bit more innovative in a lot of different areas.
Yeah, I think the Rebel series was always the beginner camera, but a DSLR is a tough thing for beginners to wrap their heads around. You know, you're not getting exposure preview and things like that. They're used to waving their camera around in front of their faces when they're taking pictures instead of using the viewfinder. So I do think like their M series makes more sense, but they seem uninterested in that as well. So it's a little confusing. The other thing is they've had that really nice 32 megapixel sensor for quite a while now, and they decided not to put it in the DSLRs, they put it in the 90D, but not in the T8i, which is kind of a baffling decision as well. So it's just anybody who's looking at those cameras, just like you said, Dan, it's like, you know, take a look at an XT30 and XS10, a Sony A6000 series body. I just think they're a better choice for people getting into it right now.
Thank you, and apologies to everybody watching. I made the mistake of not locking down my what do we call these? My overlays and my scenes. So you might have noticed that Jordan might have pulsed a little bit, and that's just because the software I'm using, Ecamm, gives you a lot of flexibility in how you can move things around. But if you don't lock them down before the show, you can create some rather interesting effects. All right, so our next camera, Dan, I'd like to take a look at is the Sony Alpha 1.
All right, this is a camera that I was fairly surprised at just how much they pushed it when it first came out. The features on it are insane. Nothing like we would ever think of seeing. 50 megapixels at 30 frames per second with, no viewfinder blackout, shooting electronic shutter, all that kind of stuff. It's really an insane camera. I think it's overpriced. I think Sony, this is really more of like an A9 III. If I was in Sony, I think what happened in the boardroom is they made an A9 III. It was so amazing that they just ended up saying, this is like a multi-generational increase in what we can do with resolution and speed and even video, and called it something else. But to me, it more feels like an A9 III. The A9 II was not a huge update. So it feels like an A9 III, and probably should have been priced in that $45,000 to $5,000 range. It's high on the price. But they're doing that because when it comes down to what they can do with the camera in terms of features, in terms of speed, in terms of video, it is better than what other brands are doing in that $6,000 category. But the negative to me would be that it's overpriced.
A lot of people have been comparing it, for right or wrong reason, to the Canon R5. They say, look, it's got a lot of the similar features, but is the price difference of $2,600 between the R5 and the A1, is it justified?
Right, and for a lot of people, no. It's a stacked CMOS sensor, which means that you can actually shoot in electronic shutter without having a lot of the issues that a lot of other cameras would. And that's the big benefit to it, and that's kind of what allows it to shoot at 30 frames per second, because there's no shutter mechanism moving in front of the camera, and that creates a whole lot of other stuff. But and in the video department, it's doing very well too, as far as features at least. But yeah, it probably should be more in that $45,000 to $5,000 range, and that would be a very good competition with the R5.
Okay, good. Jordan?
Yeah, I really think the A1, they can justify pricing it however they want, because there are so many people now who are shooting press scrums and things like that, where they're saying it has to be a silent electronic shutter camera. And if you look at the competition, like the R5 is a slow scanning sensor, you're going to have issues if you're panning with the subject and things. So their options were basically an A9, but if you want higher resolution, sorry, there's exactly one camera available that's going to give you that. And I mean, I remember they used to throw a lot of money at a 1DX or a Nikon D4, D5 or whatever for those photojournalists. That was a justified price because those are the tools they needed. I think that's where Sony is selling this camera. I mean, for someone who's a hybrid shooter, you know, it would be really tough for me to justify it, although I want to, because it's great video quality, which is the thing that really surprised me with that. I thought they would find some way to stagger that a little bit. But yeah, it's a tough camera to complain about. The price is the main drawback to it. And I still don't love the ergonomics of the Sony full frame bodies. But if you need a fast scanning, high resolution sensor, where else are you going to go? You know, you got to pony up those bucks.
Yeah, and I've been asked many times would I consider getting the Alpha 1 in here, and I said unless Sony sends it to me for a few weeks, it's that's a tough call. The A7S III I think is a terrific camera, and I'd rather have that. To me, as a video person, I think 8K is a big deal in certain scenarios. Now, if you had have asked me this a year ago before I bought the R5, I would have said, nah, it's kind of nice, future-proof, that kind of thing. But one thing I did, Jordan and Dan, is around February, it was one of those days where there was no news, there was nothing to really shoot. It had been minus 20 overnight, Celsius, and I thought, I'm getting outside. It's minus 8 right now, it's sunny, and in that temperature, the snow becomes crystallized. And I found this beautiful tree tunnel. And they were all evergreen, so right up at the top, you could see this beautiful, beautiful green, and above that was a blue. It was just absolutely gorgeous. And because there was a light dusting of snow from the night before, I shot it in 8K, and a slight wind would come by. It sounded like the trees were whispering, and you could just see it gently fall and break apart. And, you know, if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have seen the benefit to it. And when I shot my son, when he started doing his YouTube channel, I thought, well, let's just shoot it in 8K. And it was gorgeous. The detail was incredible. But if I was given a choice between two cameras, I had to pay $2,600, it would be a tough decision to make. All right, one more camera before we go on to some other things. I want to talk a little bit about humor because I know that we all seem to have a good laugh. Dan, the Nikon Z6 or Z6 Mark II.
Yeah, I actually like the camera, and some people have kind of dissed it a little bit and maybe a little bit too much. For what you can get today, I think it's one of the best cameras under $2,000. There are some weaknesses in a few different areas, but it really is one of the best cameras you can get for under $2,000. I think that Nikon should have done more with it. The Z6 II was not a huge update. They basically threw in a new processor, and that allowed some extra features and put in dual card slots, little things like that, and called it the Z6 II. I think where that's going to hurt them is down the line. So when we start seeing new Sonys come out, when we start seeing new Canons, if Fuji ever produces an XH1 or something high end in that category, it will start to show its age a little bit faster. But as of today, I think it's a solid camera overall.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Nikon gets beaten around a little bit, but I'd be perfectly happy. If I had the Z6 Mark II, I'd be quite happy with it. Even the Z6 Mark I. Jordan?
Yeah, I love shooting with the Z series bodies. I think they have probably the best ergonomics of any of the full frame mirrorless cameras right now. But just like Dan, I was disappointed with some of the upgrades, especially on the video front, because that is the big advantage of the Z6 over the Z7. And still having to use an external recorder just to get access to log recording. The raw video I found pretty underwhelming because it's all line skipped. So like, yeah, you get amazing color, but you're throwing away high ISO and detail in exchange for that. You know, raw, I should not be making compromises if I'm going to throw all those hard drives away. So, yeah, I'm a little bit mixed on it, but I love just taking out a Z6 and shooting some family stuff. It's killer. But for a lot of that too, I'd probably just grab a Z5, which has the same great ergonomics, not quite as good a sensor, and certainly not good for video. But for taking pictures, I think it's just the best value in a full frame camera right now.
Yeah, and not a lot of us. Sometimes we forget when we have a channel like this is, you know, we forget that, you know, while everybody's interested in the R5s, the Alpha 1s, and the Z9s, most of us have a budget for, you know, 1,000, 1,500, maybe 2,000 tops.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to have another surprise guest on the channel. I did reach out to, and this might be a little bit controversial here, so hopefully Jordan stays with us. But I reached out to his twin brother, Gordon, and he declined, stating there were irreconcilable differences.
That's
Jordan,
correct.
What happened between you two?
Gordon, had some success in the film industry, and that really got to his head incredibly quickly, where, I've always found the YouTube space really exciting. It's given me a lot of opportunities, but he just doesn't respect the work that I'm doing. And as we battle for our parents' love, I just don't feel like engaging in the inevitable back and forth that I know is going to happen, the condescension. It's been recorded on video. You know what I'm dealing with, and it's been a real struggle for me.
Well, I
have no further question at this point.
I did see you guys in your latest video. I think it was the GFX 50S2.
Yep.
Roman numeral 2, I think Chris said. And I got to give it to you. I think you were very, very, what's the word that I'm looking for?
Frank?
No, yeah, but frank wrapped in a velvet hammer. You were not as hard. You were not harsh like your brother Gordon. So I do wish you the best there. And one of the things I like about you guys is your use of humor. And I think it's people don't realize you can be a funny person, but once you start a YouTube channel, it's like there's a filter on the camera that completely removes humor. Yes. It's so hard to bring it back.
Yeah, it took a long time to figure out what was going to work for our show on camera. And all of the stuff that I made growing up were really dumb, short film comedy kind of things. And I know like Gerald Undone started the same way. I think that's really common. And it gives you a leg up in terms of knowing what's going to work in video. But even still, I would say our show was incredibly dry right up until we kind of had our big viral thing with Battle at F-Stop Ridge, which, again, I just did for giggles, not really with the intention of it actually becoming an advertisement for the store that would like springboard my career. But just, we thought it would be fun. And we've always, if you're going to be going out and shooting multiple videos every week, you have to have fun doing it or you'll burn out. We see it all the time. I think last year was one time where we just saw a sea of tech and camera YouTubers all just having enough, taking a month off or never coming back. So you have to make it fun. And that's how we pull that off.
Well, true story, because I started rethinking that this year. I was putting out a video a day last year because despite the global economic mess, for lack of a better sense, news was coming out so fast and furious, and Canon was dragging the R5 marketing all over the place. It was just like you couldn't get enough of it. And of course, my channel kept doing this, and I'm going like, okay, well, I'm not planning on being the news and rumor channel, but let's pivot. It's still part of my vision. And it didn't die off till right around till October, and we had the Sony a7S III and lenses, and it was just crazy. Then this year, you can hear the crickets chirping, the tumbleweed. And so I kind of asked myself, I did a bit of soul searching, and why am I doing this? Why do I want to do this? I don't know if you two know, but I actually have a full-time job. I work as an enterprise architect, plus I have a family, and the reason I started this was to help teach myself new skills. But also, my wife would work late. She wouldn't get home till 11 o'clock at night. My son would go to bed at 7, and I just didn't want to waste my time binge watching Netflix. But I do get that feeling, and this is one of those things I'm trying differently now. I'm trying to do more live streams where we discuss the news. I get in special guests. And again, thank you, Dan and Jordan, for taking a chance on a small channel like this to come and spend a Sunday evening on Labor Day weekend. I do certainly appreciate that. But Dan, I don't want to leave you alone when it comes to humor. How do you try to bring humor into your show?
So I think this is definitely one of the harder things for me. I tend to be somewhat of a perfectionist, and when the camera is running, I want everything to be perfect. But honestly, some of the most funny moments are the stuff that happens that I want to cut out. And you have to, it's always a fight with myself. Like, this was a stupid thing that happened, but it was funny. It was in a moment. Whatever happened. When I now go out and shoot, I tell people just keep recording, because if you start to only record the moments that you think are going to be good. That's the funny parts. The you is what happens in the middle. That's where the personality comes out. And this is something I'm still battling with because it's anti my personality, is to not just record my perfect moments, but also to record the parts that are just me that happen in between it, to create more story with it, to and even, one thing that the video does, our YouTube channels are very familiar to who we are personally. You'll see our personalities come through. However, probably only like half of it. So the other half of my life, if you were to pan the other side of this camera, is all music stuff. It's drum sets and pianos and guitars. And so incorporating some of those other elements that are true to you into it is another way to just bring out more of your personality into it and create humor and fun stuff.
And you know what? I encourage you too, Dan, because, certainly as somebody who's a fan of yours as well, because as soon as I did this first time, as soon as I dumped the teleprompter, and as soon as I started just kind of doing these one takes, because you'll see I don't use jump cuts, and basically it's a one long take, you start to get more comments from your audience saying like, wow, that was great, got to see another side of you. And I whenever people bring in humor, and I see this with a lot of blockbuster movies, one of the reasons I think Ryan Reynolds is so successful and others like him is where they sort of bring that honest, self-deprecating sense of humor, and they bring it in and they do it well. It's, to coin Steve Jobs, it's absolutely magical.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of want to piggyback on what Dan said there, because I think you were at the it was at the M6 II launch, Dan, in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Were you there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I wasn't able to attend that one. So I sent my buddy Levi Hallwell, who's an amazing filmmaker, and he tends to overshoot. I would say if I have a problem, it's that I undershoot, and I do miss a lot of those things. So he brought back, 3 memory cards full of stuff, and I was furious at first because I was going to have to wade through this. And even though I didn't shoot that episode, that is one of my absolute favorite DP review episodes, because there's so much of Chris just, giving people a hard time or taking abuse and stuff like that, or, screwing something up, forgetting a back cap, all that kind of stuff that generally wouldn't be captured was all there. And afterwards, I really started to be like, I've got to just start, even if I'm not framing up something, just rolling on the camera so I have audio that I can dump into a montage or something like that. That was kind of a wake-up call for me.
That's awesome too. I remember that video. But I got to say, I one of the reasons I reached out to you, Jordan, first is because of your sense of humor, that you feel very down to earth. And also, people don't realize you actually helped me in a pinch a couple of months ago when I was giving a contest away to act as an impartial judge, which I'm really happy to, because the person who won that was the same one who won it previously, and that air of transparency really helped. But as we're coming up to an hour now, and I know that you said you've got an hour, so what I would like to do is kind of close off with the last question, then give you guys a chance to sort of talk as you would like to, and then we can kind of fade off shortly thereafter. But first, a quick thanks to Jesse for a $10 super chat. Much appreciated, my friend. Thank you very much. And Jesse, I know Jesse's been with me for a long time and also entered that challenge a little while ago too. So a little bit of a preamble first. This is about technology. Now, in 1985, Commodore released the Amiga computer, and it really opened my eyes as a 15-year-old to video editing and computer-generated effects. This combination of the video toaster and Lightwave 3D disrupted television in a different way than many of us realize. It made shows like, what is it, Sequest DSV or DSB Sequest and Babylon 5 possible, all of it being rendered and shot on a farm of Amiga computers. And it also made broadcast quality video editing affordable. Instead of spending $100,000, you could now spend $6,000 on a home video editing system, which sounds expensive today, but for 1985, 1990, it wasn't. So the question to you, I'll start off with you, Dan, is I want to give you the freedom to go where you want with this, but what do you feel? You can talk about something in the past that you feel technology has really changed this industry, or you can talk about a technology that you see as potentially going to change the industry. So I'll let you go anywhere on the timeline.
All right. So I think computers are going to hit another growth spurt in the next probably year or two, especially I think Apple's M1 processor kind of opened up a lot of floodgates for the potential of doing some crazy video editing on a pretty inexpensive computer. And just being able to process, 4K 60 and 4K 120 on a $1,200 MacBook Air or something like that, while a $3,000 computer, even I have a $10,000 Apple Pro that just can't handle some of the stuff that this thing does. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot of that. I don't know. I hope we start seeing a little bit of quality come back to the online space as well. I think it's been too easy to let some of the quality go in favor of just having something that we can conveniently upload online and stuff like that. And I hope we start seeing us being able to bring some of that quality back in the future. But yeah, I mean, being able to shoot, for a video perspective for YouTube especially, being able to shoot 4K 60 and 4K 120 was the big achievement of this year. I think for me, I don't do those like for a lot of paid projects too much, but being able to do that has really kind of been that feature that you couldn't really get on consumer cameras up until this year.
Yeah, well said, Dan. That same laptop, I really didn't believe a lot of what some people were saying because it just sounded too good to be true. And then I needed a computer because my son was schooling at home. So I bought the $1,200 MacBook Air, not the one with the 8 cores, the 7, not the one with the 16 gigs of RAM, but 8. And believe it or not, I was able to edit 8K video off the R5, so that's all that's a huge amount of bandwidth, 8K, edit it with effects, with color grading, color balancing. It didn't drop a frame whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Now, export, it took like 90 minutes, so it wasn't optimized for exporting. But as far as editing on I'm gobsmacked. So, George, I was going to say Dan again. Jordan?
I want to say on the computer side, I'm on an M1 iMac as well for the exact same reason. The R5, the Sony A1, and the A7S III all just made my, like a $4,500 laptop just burst into flames. So I ran a couple tests. And yeah, it's been fantastic. We're doing a lot of videos now that are 5.9K, where I would very rarely use that. But now it's just like, you know what? We could use some cropping room here. So why not? I'm willing to sacrifice, 422 going down to 420 on the S1H. But having the extra resolution might be worth it. So it's changed the way that I work, just having that ability. But if we're going to talk about like the big technological shift that really changed things, I was actually not doing video for quite a while. I was really into photography when Chris and I first became friends. And it's just because I hit a threshold where it's like, if I want to do something that looks like a movie, it's either I find a producer to finance film or the red one was just available at that point. And I did one project on it and we actually had 3 reds because one would brick and have to get shipped. And then you'd hope that the other 2 would survive until that one came back. Yeah. And you could cycle through it. It was a very weird time. When the 5D Mark II came out, it did get me re-excited about video. I did a silent black and white movie for my wedding. And it was just like, wow, there's moire and aliasing all over this entire thing. But I had more fun shooting that than I had in a very long time. Second thing I shot with the 5D Mark II was Battle at F-Stop Ridge, which springboarded my career. And ever since then, it's just been like, look, I want a cinematic kind of aesthetic at a approachable price point for normal people. And I think that's why I got so excited doing the Camera Store TV and DP Review is like, hey, look, the advancements in cameras changed my life. Yeah. So it's certainly going to be possible for other people as well. And I've kind of, people are always like, why don't you review the big cinema cameras and things like that? It's like, big cinema cameras didn't change the way that I work and build a career and revitalize my passion for filmmaking. It was small DSLRs and mirrorless cameras. So that's what I'm still to this day the most excited about.
There's something about these, because I've asked myself the same thing. Why not get an FX3 or a C70? And, when I travel, because the driving force behind this for me has been the personal stuff that I do. when I travel, I put this around my neck and no one bothers me. I go into a museum, wherever I am, no one bothers me. But if I had a video camera around my neck, it would be a different story. There's places where you can go, you can't get in with a video camera that you can get in with a stills camera. And the video capabilities of these, they're lightweight. I can switch out any multitude of lenses and create a different look and feel. And I know it's a photo camera. And somebody made a comment just a little while ago stating that, you know, why don't these cameras be more video-centric? And you'd be surprised, but my view is I think they're becoming a lot more video-centric. Companies are realizing if they don't sell to the video side, Canon, for example, they're going to lose a lot of people. Canon lost a lot of people to Sony because customers like me looked at, well, what are our choices? Yes, we got a great 90D, but then if we look into full frame, there wasn't a lot of options there, at least.
Yeah, actually, what Jordan was saying too, at a similar experience, like I started shooting video and I had like Canon XL1s and I still have like my GL1 from way back when. And I stopped shooting video for a little bit because these were dedicated video cameras and I just wasn't doing it that much. And then I picked up a photo camera and started doing more with that. And eventually these photo cameras started shooting video again. Yeah. And I think the 70D was where I started kind of getting a little bit back into it. Mm-hmm. I picked up the 70D. It shot great video as well. And from then on, that hybrid camera brought me back into video where I'd kind of given up. It was just too much work. It was too much effort. It was too much a chance of stuff going wrong. It wasn't worth it for me. So I started shooting stills a lot. And then, yeah, when that hybrid camera came out and I could shoot both on one camera, I was all over it, started shooting a video again. And now 10 years later.
Yeah, I know. Well, final thoughts, guys, because we've just gone over a few minutes and I want to respect your time. Jordan, if you want to start us off, final thoughts from you.
I think this was just a fun, well, first of all, it's nice to catch up with Dan again. But I do think you mentioned it's been kind of a slow stretch going on through the last little while. But I do really think that we're going to start seeing some exciting developments here again in photo video land. Just based on, I mean, everybody's doing all these pre-announcement things now, which make it easy to predict. It's going to be a very exciting end of the year. So I am very much looking forward to that. But also, it's just always nice, as I said at the top of the show, to just talk to other people who are doing what I'm doing, because I don't get that opportunity as much as I used to anymore. So thanks, both of you guys, for hanging out today.
No, thank you.
Absolutely.
Dan, do you have a last words you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to get so isolated when you're doing this kind of stuff, especially now in pandemic times. Like, we used to go out to these events and every time a new camera was there, I was there with Jordan. So it was, awesome getting to hang out and you kind of get other people's perspectives on it. This is really good because it becomes very isolating where you get a camera and you do your thing and then you post it and you might not see what anybody else is doing with it. You might not hear other people's feedbacks, what's going on in their lives, all that kind of stuff. So this format is really awesome. It's been awesome hanging out.
Yeah, it has.
Dad, when are we going to do the drum off on a live event? I think it's time. Yeah.
That should be fun.
Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Jordan. And thank you for tuning in to watch The Ordinary Filmmaker. This has been a lot of fun for me. And once I close off this video, I'm actually going to put it in unlisted so you can watch it later. But my plans are to take this, re-upload it, because I've recorded this in 4K locally to my machine. So you'll get to watch it in better video quality later. And I hope to have that up later tonight. Again, thank you so much for tuning in to watch The Ordinary Filmmaker. We'll see you again soon. Now, just to cue out here, I got to remember these buttons properly.